that intimacy outside the bedroom. Again, the cliche, sex starts in the kitchen.
Sure.
It's that thing.
And I'm taking that someplace where I shouldn't, so I'm just... Anyway, go ahead.
Very rarely does Jen cause me to lose my train of thought and me not be able to actually have words, but this is one of those times where Jen once again caught me speechless.
You're welcome, audience.
Anyway, this is all a vicious cycle because now the men are fearing failure in their relationship.
You may be one choice away from a thriving marriage. Welcome to the Operation Thriving Marriage podcast with Brian and Jennifer Harvey.
Well, welcome back to the Operation Thriving Marriage podcast. I'm Jennifer Harvey. I'm here with my husband, Brian Harvey. So glad that you've joined us and so ready to jump into this topic.
As many of you know, listening, if your first time listening, I've been in the Michigan Air National Guard for many years, serving there, military, a big part of my life. And safety is a really important thing in the military. I mean, we make jokes about the ridiculous safety briefs we get because we do get some really stupid safety briefings. Let's just be honest there. If you're listening and you're in the military, you're already thinking of some of the dumb safety briefs that you've heard. It's so ridiculous. But it's important that we focus on safety because we have an inherently dangerous job.
Oh my goodness. You just feel like if you don't focus on safety, like literally someone could die.
Absolutely. So operating and doing what we do, it's inherently dangerous, so we need to be as safe as possible. So to create that safe environment, we have to know the dangers. We have to know what risks are out there that we can mitigate or need to at least be aware of it. If we can eliminate a safety risk, we need to just get rid of it. And if we can't eliminate it, what do we do to make sure that that safety risk is the minimum damage it could possibly do or most avoidable in whatever thing that we're doing?
And the same is true in marriage, or at least I think could be argued in marriage. You want to make sure that things are very safe within that relationship, because marriage should be the safest human relationship that you have. And to create safe relationships, we also need to know these different dangers to be guarded against.
And so today we're talking particularly to the men.
Okay, dudes.
All right, guys.
Listen up.
Let's just be honest. In our culture, it's still true. We are not conditioned to communicate well about our feelings and well in our relationships. Now, that being said, shout out to the millennials, the Gen Zs, the Gen Alphas. Gentlemen, you're doing so much better than Gen X and before has for men about communicating about our feelings. You guys are way more open about how you're feeling than I've ever seen men be. But even in that, it's still an issue, particularly in marriage, where we're still conditioned not to put that on our spouses, not to appear weak in front of our spouses, not to, and so it's like, okay for guys to be like honest about things, but when it comes to marriage relationships, it's still a struggle. And so marriages often struggle because the safety that should be there for the husbands is lacking, and it's because the husband isn't communicating the risks, isn't communicating what's going on, and therefore the wife doesn't know what things should be defended against. And another thing I want to hit on this, though, a lot of guys don't want to talk to their wives about this thing because, ladies, you do the same thing you tell us not to do. You try to fix us.
Okay.
You know? And so we're going to talk more about that, but that's another, this isn't just guys, I'm not going to spend the next, however long this podcast is, the next 15 minutes on spot, telling guys to open up and be more like, no, I mean, I want to be honest about here's some of the risks and some of the things to be aware of. But this is so, gentlemen, you have more tools in your toolbox to connect with your wife. But this is also, ladies, so you can be more aware of what your husband may be experiencing. And remember, this is not so that you can fix him, but that you can be aware of it and you can walk through this together.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's just such an important thing to do, because we've talked about men conditioned not to communicate about relationships and feelings, and I think unfortunately some people would ridicule men for doing that. As you mentioned, Brian, I think that up and coming generations are doing a lot better with that kind of a thing. But I think I'm here to say that no one should be ridiculed for sharing feelings, male or female. Right. And I really like how you've outlined this just with the team marriage concept of the husband isn't communicating risks, so the wife doesn't know what needs to be defended against, but them being a team and working together so that the husband does need to do that communication, but the wife has to have his back and stand up to defend against these things. So just, two powerful people in a couple being able to grow together and build that strong marriage.
So let's talk about some of these common struggles that men experience, right? And these are not the only struggles that men experience, but these seem to be the ones that particularly create insecurity in marriage, or they particularly seem to create an environment in marriage that can create disconnection, keep a marriage from thriving. And one of them is fear of failure.
Okay.
Guys, we're conditioned with the mantra that failure is not an option. I mean, just time and time again, that's just beat into us, whether it's sports, whether it's in academics, or in the workforce, like, hey, failure's not an option. Even though we, at the same time, hear fail forward and you have to fail so many times to find the right idea. In life, guys, we're still conditioned to, you better not fail.
And like you said, just so many conflicting things that men get thrown at them in society. I think a lot of times we've had podcasts where we've talked specifically about this for women, but men are getting these double messages as well.
And for guys, I mean, our identity is often centered in our success. Just who you are. Are you worthwhile? Are you, who you are as a person and your value, oftentimes for guys is culturally communicated that it's your success.
And briefly, could you tease out what success means?
Well, and that's a good point. It could be very different. So living here in Ann Arbor, in the home of the University of Michigan, you can't just say U of M. No, it's the U of M. But anyway, here in this town, a lot of it has to do with academic credentialing, would be success. It's like, do you have all 26 letters of the alphabet after your name? What is your academic credentialing? Where have you gone to school and what have you done with that? So in this town, there's a lot of that. Just over in Wayne County, where we lived before we moved to Ann Arbor, that community was much more business related. And a lot of that was, what's your bottom line? What is your net worth? And has that grown year over year? But it's funny because it's demonstrated a lot in what home you live in and what zip code, or what kind of vacations have you gone on? Do you have the home in northern Michigan? Are you taking the family to Disney World because when you live in Michigan, Florida's the promised land?
The promised land, the pilgrimage down I-75.
And are you taking your family on that annual vacation? So a lot of those are the two big ones that I see, but also in the military, it could be rank. How fast did you make? Were you senior airman below the zone for Air Force? I don't know what the equivalent for the other services. Did you make senior NCO? Or officers? Their rank structure is a little different, but did they get a command tour? What jobs were you selected for? Those are all things that we quantify success and then quantify value in ways, and the fear of not doing that, of not getting command, of not having enough money to go to Disney World this year, of not having that next paper published in that journal to show your academic prowess. Those fears often haunt men.
So what I'm kind of hearing is failure, no matter how small or not, achieving this next level of success kind of thing, it's seen as somehow catastrophic. Is that right?
It can be, yeah, absolutely. That's how it's just how men are often conditioned. One of the core fears for men is fear of failure. And that's one of the common struggles that can absolutely sabotage a marriage. But another is emotional suppression. It's cliche because it's true. Men don't talk about their emotions. Now, like we said, millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha, not so much because you guys are too young. If you're Gen Alpha listening to this podcast, then you've grown and you were not married when we recorded this. But anyway, the younger generations are better at this. Shout out to you guys, but it's still a thing where men avoid talking about emotions.
And men often avoid dealing with these emotions, and that can be very problematic. And I say this would be the case for men and women, where it would be a problem. But we're talking about men here because it can lead to men being distant. It can lead to increased anxiety and depression. And that can also ultimately lead to a lot of different health problems, not just mental health problems, but physical health problems manifesting in things like high blood pressure. This can just be so damaging for your relationship, but also for you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Emotional suppression is another way to sabotage your marriage, but it's also creating huge problems for you to be able to do the things that you want to do. And the last one we're going to talk about is kind of one of the struggles that men often face is trouble with intimacy. Now, guys are often conditioned to rate their romantic ability based on their ability to perform sexually. It's like, how well can you perform physically in the bedroom, which communicates the wrong thing because sex and sexuality are a healthy, important part of intimacy in a relationship. But since guys are fear failure, since guys suppress their emotions, since they're taught, hey, this is what intimacy is, how good are you in the bedroom, being rated, you'll lose the ability to actually truly be intimate and open and vulnerable, which crashes everything that a marriage should be built upon in a healthy way.
Right. And that's a very stark contrast to women who are typically responding sexually more often based on emotion than physical stimulation. And women typically have to feel loved and accepted to enjoy sex at all.
And look at the vicious cycle of what happens. The guys, when we don't communicate and build that intimacy outside the bedroom, again, the cliche, sex starts in the kitchen. It's that thing. When we're not building that up.
And I'm taking that someplace where I shouldn't. So I'm just, anyway, go ahead.
Very rarely does Jen cause me to lose my train of thought and me not be able to actually have words. But this is one of those times where Jen once again caught me speechless.
You're welcome, audience.
Anyway, this is all a vicious cycle because now the men are fearing failure in their relationship because they're suppressing their emotions and not being intimate. So the romantic aspect of the relationship isn't what they ought to be. And it just creates this vicious cycle that it just brings marriages crashing down. And this ought not be, and it doesn't have to be.
In these barriers for sexual intimacy and relational struggles, I mean, to me, I would just say that you just feel like the marriage is under attack from the world, from demonic forces, maybe doing some manipulations in there. But it's like we've really, I think as people of faith, we've got to really get back to the basics and be that counterculture for the good of our marriage and ultimately for the good of society.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's definitely, I mean, all of those, the world, the flesh, and the devil are all playing into all of those insecurities. And like you've brought up a few times in this podcast, and we've had other podcasts talking about things with women, it's not only men that deal with these, but these are the common manifestations of the way it is for men. And so husbands, the biggest way to overcome these struggles is something that men are actually really good at, because just how men are wired, we are much less risk averse than women. You know, women don't say, hold my whatever beverage that you choose so I can show you how I'm going to jump on this trampoline and then break their necks. Women just look at the guys and say, why are they doing this? We are good at taking risks. We're designed by God to be risk takers. So this is an area where we need to take that strength that God has put in us and take those risks and be vulnerable. Take the risk, and instead of holding my adult beverage or whatever beverage it is and trying to do backflips on the kids' trampoline, it's like, no, let's sit down over a cup of coffee together and let me talk about these things that are going on inside me right now.
Absolutely.
And take that risk. And you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I kind of do know what's going to happen because your wife loves you and she's going to be there and support you. But it feels scarier than jumping on some kid's bike and trying to jump the ramp that the kids just built. You know, it's scary, but take that risk. And that's how you mitigate and overcome some of these struggles that are common to all of us men in marriage.
And I'm just saying, hey, girl, hey, to the wives, make sure you accept your husbands where they are. Don't expect them to open up quickly or immediately, especially if that's not something that they've been in a habit of doing with you. You have to really become and build into being a safe place for your husband all the time, anytime he'd come to you. Listen the same way you want your husband to listen to you. Be supportive. This is something where, again, you're not trying to change them or fix them. Make sure that you're listening fully and you're not trying to jump in there to just respond. So have that quiet listening about you as they're explaining what their emotions are, and acknowledge that risk that they're taking and make them feel completely safe in that vulnerability that they've entrusted to you.
Your marriage is going to be so much better when you do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to be stronger and healthier. Marriage should be the safest human relationship you ever experience. When this isn't the case for men, it's usually because we're not being honest and vulnerable about our concerns and our fears to our wives. You know, it's a trope on television sitcoms where guys will be sitting at the bar talking to their buddy about things that they should, and their buddy's like, well, did you ask your wife? Did you talk to your... I mean, we need to not be so afraid to communicate our insecurities with our wives, because that's why God has given us marriage, so they can be there to help carry those burdens. And wives, just like husbands, wives can forget sometimes, in an effort to make things better, that the job isn't to fix it. The job is to listen and support and care for it. We all need to take heed of Psalms 119 and be quick to listen, because that's how we make our marriages thrive.
Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of Operation Thriving Marriage. We ask that you would like this, give us some comments, and give us some love out there. And we would love to meet you at an Operation Thriving Marriage Experience Live event. So give us a call, see what we can do to schedule that at your church or your ministry.
Jen and I started Operation Thriving Marriage to help couples and churches take marriages from merely surviving to thriving. We've got our book, we've got a blog, and resources for our coaching ministry, and you can bring us out for an Operation Thriving Marriage experience. For more information, go to operationthrivingmarriage.com. That's operationthrivingmarriage.com.